Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by The Athletic. Today on the show, Mark Schindler is in the building. He's moving up from his typical Thursday into Friday morning spot into a Tuesday slot, if only because he's traveling this weekend and we wanted to get him on the show. Mark, we're actually going to talk about basketball today. How good does it feel? I feel like so few people are actually talking about basketball at this point.
Yeah, don't remind me. No, I mean, honestly, I thought I got moved up because my batting average went up. I was hitting like 280 this last month. So, but you don't want to mention that. That's fine. But
we're about to go full Ted Williams with you. You're hitting a robust 400, I would say.
Oh,
Schindler.
wow.
No questions asked about that.
Wow. Hey, I can't complain about hitting 400, but no, man, things are good. Like you mentioned, I'm traveling. I'm going tomorrow for the next couple of days. I'm going to be in Detroit, actually. To go do a story on the Detroit Shocker having their 20th anniversary of their first championship in 2003. So I'm really excited to do that. I haven't been to Detroit since I was at Michigan State. So it's been a minute considering how close I lived to that city. I've lived in Toledo for 3 years, which is like a 25-minute drive. And I still, hardly ever went there. But I'm excited, man. We have a lot of good stuff to talk about. Work trips are just never ending, which I appreciate. But I've been writing like crazy the last couple of days, so I'm kind of ready to get out of the house.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I went and filmed a bunch of stuff for Tab. Shout out Tab, friend of the show over here in Australia.
Tab,
and I was gone for
the former soft drink that got canceled, but no, I'm just kidding.
This one is Tab Sportsbook over here in Australia. We love those folks over there, but I was just so wiped yesterday. So we're going a little bit later today than what we typically do with you because I actually woke up at like 8:00 today for the first time during the week in like so long because my brain and body just were totally fried after the last couple of days. But today on the show, we are going to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are in a really fun stretch of basketball here, largely because of Donovan Mitchell. And Donovan Mitchell has taken just this really fun leap this season that, I don't know, I see top 10s for MVP. I just, generally looked at the NBA.com MVP ladder. And that's one voter, right? Of course. I don't mean to denigrate that one voter either. They don't have him in the top 10 right now. And I see people that don't have him in the top 10, and it's just kind of confounding to me. So I kind of want to talk about how good Donovan Mitchell has been this season with avoiding the MVP conversation, because goodness, what a disaster that has become. Then we're going to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans, who are in an incredibly strange stretch of basketball where it feels like they desperately need Zion Williamson to return, but also they should probably be having more success than what they're having right now. And there seem to be some structural issues that are occurring within what they're actually doing and trying to achieve on the court. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Then we're going to do some 2023 NBA draft prospect battles, which is people who have watched us do prospect battles in the past with spins. I'm bringing Schindler into the fold here. Typically we do it with NBA players. This time we're going to do it with college prospects now that their season is coming near an end. The three that we have on the docket today, we have Gradey Dick against Jordan Hawkins, two of the best floor spacers in this 2023 NBA draft. We have Jarice Walker against Taylor Hendricks from UCF, two guys that are seen as 6'8" to 6'9", multi-versatile defensive prospects that have different offensive games in the way that they translate to the league. And then we're going to do Terrence Shannon against Colby Jones, two guys that are Mark Schindler specials. They're just guys that he really loves, and I really like one of them, and I'm intrigued to talk about the other one a little bit more. So that's where we're going to go. Mark, let's start with the Cleveland Cavaliers. You mentioned that you wanted to talk about Donovan Mitchell here, so I'm just going to give you the floor to start. What has impressed you with Donovan Mitchell thus far? And obviously he has the 40-point game last night and was so critical to everything they did in beating the Celtics. But I'll give you the floor on Donovan Mitchell before I could jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, what hasn't impressed me about Donovan Mitchell? He's been sensational this year. I think you look right now at the Cavs, they're a top 10 offense, and I don't want to say it's solely him, but largely on the back of his shot making, what he does getting downhill for them. It feels like every single night when things kind of bog down for them or they are having some kind of issues with dealing with their fifth player on the court, It just doesn't matter because Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland find a way to take over. It's been special to watch. Like, I don't really think that there's been a drop off from him defensively from what he was doing in the beginning of the year, which that's been one of his biggest improvements, has just been not being a total negative on that end. I still don't think he's like all defense or anything, obviously, but that has helped. But the heavy lifting that he's done, particularly over his last 10 games, have been just kind of wild to me. I still want to know if, is Malcolm Brogdon still in Cleveland after getting crossed up yesterday? Did he go back to Virginia for his 5th year? Like, what? That was, it was wild. I was watching the game with a friend of ours, Zach Milner, and I reacted like heavily to the cross. I was like, oh, and then he punched it. And I lost my mind. I woke up my dog. I woke up, I'm pretty sure I woke up my family who was sleeping a couple of rooms over. That was one of the best plays I've seen this year, just in general, as a pure holy shit. And I think, so much of the last couple of years of him in Utah have been like, oh, well, he's bombing away from 3, and that's really been awesome. And like, obviously he mixes that in with what he does as attacking the basket, but I think it's at a different level with what he brings attacking the basket right now. Like, the pace and control he has attacking off the bounce has been something special. Like, his ability to just weave through traffic, seemingly always on balance, has been really impressive to watch. And I feel like that's continued to be his biggest growth over the last probably 2 or 3 years. I think that's been a steady thing for him that really came along last year. And I think this year it just pops so much. And like, finally, the last 10 game stat finally loaded for me, but over his last 10 games, so the Cavs are 6-4, but he's averaging 31.3 points per game, 5 boards, 4 assists on 50, 39, 92 splits, while taking 10 threes a game. Like, it's been one of the best. And part of what's so crazy too, like, we're talking about him having the same stretch. Well, Dame's having a stretch. Like, it feels like everybody in the NBA as an individual is playing really well right now. It's been a really special stretch. And like you mentioned too, like 3 40-point games in this stretch as well. It's been one hell of a year from Donovan Mitchell. And I would want to add too, he would make an all-NBA team for me right now, probably without question. He'd probably be 3rd team, but I would not have to really think about that one too much.
So yeah, I've honestly been wondering, has he been outside of Luka, if you want to call Luka a guard? Luka is amorphous in so many ways positionally. Has he been the 2nd best guard in terms of consistency this year and in terms of impact in the NBA? Like, Ja Morant is obviously going to miss quite a bit of time here. It feels like maybe one game, maybe who knows? I don't know how long Ja Morant has been out. It feels like Taylor Jenkins, specifically after the game, said that it's unclear at this point how long he'll be away from the team. Stephen Curry has missed quite a bit of time, 2 separate stretches this season. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been great. I would certainly listen to a case for him. I would certainly listen to a case for Damian Lillard at this point. But what Donovan Mitchell has done on both ends of the court this year, I think particularly, has been absolutely phenomenal. And he's transformed this Cavaliers team that I think often just gets lost in the conversation across the league. Like, they have the 5th best record in the NBA right now. And because they're 4th in the Eastern Conference, and because people think of them as not having quite as much of a chance to get out of the East as Boston, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, I think that they're often forgotten in this conversation. And the season that they're having is being a bit like just kind of thrown to the side almost, maybe. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, I think I'm like half in, half out on it. Like, on one hand, I get why it gets overlooked considering what the top 4 teams in the East have been. I know like their record against the top 4 hasn't been tremendous compared to, some of the other teams, but also like, I think it's when they have games like that. And to be fair to, like, I don't want to oversell it for Boston. Like, 2nd night of a back-to-back, I was expecting that to be a worse game than it ended up being. Like, I was honestly expecting Boston to come out pretty sluggish and lose. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a back-to-back. They just played a double OT game the night before. Jason Tatum didn't play. Al Horford didn't play. But I mean, yeah, I think, like, to me, I look at this this Cavs team, I'm really excited to see in the playoffs. I think I definitely have reservations and questions about like we mentioned, like what that fifth player in the on the court can look like at times, but
Yep.
they just seem to find ways to string things together. And with how well Darius and geez, bless Darius's heart. That dude gets hit in the face per 48 minutes more than anybody in the NBA that isn't 7 feet tall. Like I think Domantas Sabonis probably has the per 48 but locked up easily, but Darius been hit in the face like 6 times this year, which has been just wild. But point being, this like Evan Mobley's game yesterday too. Like we're all talking about what Donovan did, and to be fair, like the Celtics were a little bit depleted in the front court yesterday, but Evan's been awesome over the last month or so. Like obviously the shot is still a ways away, but he's been so good playing through contact, physicality, just the defense continues to really pop and be awesome. I feel like he's been able to anchor lineups more as a 5, and they've needed him to this year as well because some of their backup options just haven't really worked. And it's just been really fun to watch this Cavs team. I feel like I don't have any crazy expectations for them, but they feel like a team that could make some real noise in the playoffs with how well they're putting some things together.
Yeah. So with Cleveland here, I think that part of what is so impressive to me is that they have the best net rating in the league. Like per 100 possessions, they beat teams by more points over the aggregate than any other team in the NBA right now. I feel like nobody knows that, right? Like I feel like that is something that has just been completely ignored. They have the best net rating in the NBA right now at, I think it's like plus 5.7. They're doing this in spite of the fact that they've actually played a fairly difficult schedule. Like this is not a schedule-based thing where they just haven't had their tough games yet. They currently have a top 8 strength of schedule, according to Basketball Reference. If you look at Milwaukee currently, they are 19th. If you look at Boston currently, they are 15th. So they have a better net rating against a harder schedule than both of those two teams. And again, it feels like people just dismiss them. And I don't disagree with you in terms of like wondering, what does that fifth starter look like? What does that situation look like if you can sag off of Isaac Okoro or if you can sag off of Lamar Stevens or someone like that? It's kind of why I imagine they went out and tried to get Danny Green. And honestly, like I think that Dean Wade is probably their best option in the playoffs. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think what's hard is like it's going to be really matchup dependent because if they play a team that can, go 3 pretty smalls, like I think if there's a team that like with Boston, I think Dean Wade would be, but if they're playing a team that's running, 3 guards or 2 guards, smaller wing, like I think it's a little bit harder for Dean to be out there. But what helps too is like I think they can get away with some things just by virtue of like even yesterday and watching. If they have a team that doesn't go on like a crazy outlier shooting performance, they just cover so much ground between Jared and Evan that it kind of allows them to be a little bit different defensively in how they handle the dimensions of the court. And I think that gives them just an extra little gear that I think matters a lot. And Isaac, to his credit, has been a lot better recently. He's still not getting treated like a shooting threat, and I don't think he should be, but he's at least been confident and it's been better. But yeah, I agree. It's still they at least like they closed with Lamar Stevens yesterday. He's the leading scorer in overtime. Don't let that get undersold. 5 points in overtime and some big defensive plays. So yeah, I don't really know what to make of them sometimes. Like do I want to see Lamar Stevens start in a playoff game? Close in a playoff game? Yes, but also no. Like they're a really fun team. I don't really know. Again, like I'm not trying to like just fence it, but they keep pushing themselves up in what I feel should have them considered as contenders. So it's interesting.
Well, and the interesting thing with them, I feel like, is that all of their games against good teams are close. Like everything that they play against really good teams, like you can go back, like they've had the game against the Celtics last night, right? That's a 4-point win in overtime. They have the game against the Celtics a couple games ago. That's a 4-point loss. They lose by 6 to the Nuggets. They lose by 6 to the 76ers on the road. they beat the Grizzlies, with Ja Morant and those guys by 15, but then you can kind of go down. Like they lose to the Heat by 3, they lose to the Knicks by 2, they beat the Bucks, they lose to the Warriors by 6, they lose to the Grizzlies by 1. It's just that every single game it feels like where they play another good team, they're all tight and they're all very, very competitive games. It doesn't feel like they're getting blown up. Like they never get blown off the court, I feel like, which I think is a credit to their defense as much as anything. Like it's hard to blow a team off the court that has Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, who are are they genuinely both like in all defense conversation? I feel like
for me,
they are legitimately both in all defense conversation at this point, and they both should be. They've been incredible throughout the course of this season.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, they're number 1 defense in the NBA, and it just hasn't dropped off at all this season, really. So I would be there with it. I'm trying to think what else to say on that. Like, I think I do just want to correct myself. I think I may have flubbed what their record is against contenders. I know it's better than I think I put it out to be. I had it written down incorrectly, but point being, like exactly like you mentioned, they feel matchup dependent for sure, as any team is. One of the games I have circled over this next month is they play the Knicks for the last time on March 31st. Because that could be it's looking closer and closer, like it could be a playoff series. Yeah. Although Philadelphia really wants to make it not a playoff series and maybe find their way into the 4 seed, it feels like. But they've struggled with the Knicks this year. Like they're 2-1. I don't want to oversell too much of that. The Knicks, I think, went undefeated against the Hawks the year that the Hawks gentlemen swept them in the playoffs. But like that's just the team that everything is about. Okay, draw 2, kick, shoot well, play really hard defense, be physical. Like I think that team has really, I don't want to say exposed something in them, but it's just a team that they've struggled to match up with. So I'm interested to see what that looks like again. Obviously, we're a ways away from that, but this team rocks. I enjoy them.
Yeah, so they have great defense. They have genuinely great shot creation, right? Because of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. I don't know, man. I feel like this is a more dangerous team than gets credit. I agree with you on the Knicks part. Like that Knicks matchup actually does feel very difficult for them, right? In a way that the Knicks can just kind of bludgeon them in a real way at the rim with guys like Julius Randle and with Mitchell Robinson, but they can also go small. They just have that lineup versatility and flexibility now with Josh Hart that I think is going to be able to potentially cause the Cavaliers some problems in the playoffs. But I mean, for the Celtics, right? Like the Celtics are at their best when they can play 2 bigs. In the Cavs are at their best when they can play 2 bigs, and their 2 bigs are better than Boston's 2 bigs. And it then comes down to what is the difference between Jason Tatum and Donovan Mitchell in a playoff series, and what's the difference between Darius Garland and Jaylen Brown in a playoff series. And I want to learn the answer to that question. I think Boston probably wins that series, but I at least think that there are schematic advantages and schematic differences that Boston could have problems with against the Cavs at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one thing I do want to say too, just as a random shot, I think there's been a little bit too much of like skepticism about Boston lately. Yes, they've gone through a little bit of a doldrum. They're 10-10 over their last 20 games. They've dealt with a lot of injuries. They've had guys in and out. And also, like, we just kind of see teams hit the gas a little bit. I mean, hit the brakes a little bit at times. Like, if they're still playing like this a week before the playoffs, then I'll have more questions. But right now, like, I get like Tatum has his bad games. I'm like, okay, but look at all the other things that do pop even when they don't have things going. Like I thought yesterday was one of Jaylen Brown's best games of the season. Seeing some of the things that he put together. But yeah, exactly. Like Boston is still really freaking good. I feel like that's kind of been lost lately.
It is interesting to me, and to close the loop on Donovan Mitchell now, and we'll move on to the Pelicans after this. It is interesting to me that we've seen more of the Donovan Mitchell craft stuff as a ball handler this year. In part because he's needed it, because that lane is just a little bit more crowded, right?
Yeah.
With Jared Allen, with Evan Mobley. and with the fact that their third guy on the court often isn't necessarily a high-level shooter. But it feels interesting to me that when he had all of the space in the world in Utah, with all of the shooting, the rim running, everything around him, maybe he just didn't need to develop that part of his skill, or maybe he's had it and we just like didn't get a chance to see it. But you're 100% right what you said earlier. His craft and his footwork and his ability to play at pace in the mid-range now and getting to the rim and being able to be an efficient scorer inside of the 3-point line, which is something that he has always struggled with throughout the course of his career. This is his career best season as a 2-point percentage finisher. He is like 2.5 percentage points better than last season, where he was 53%. He's at like 56% right now. And you look back through the previous 3 years, it was like 47%, 49%, 47%. This was a guy that had all the space in the world, should have been able to finish at an exceptionally high level. Given the situation around him, you would expect those numbers to actually drop in terms of his 2-point percentage, but he clearly has gotten better in the offseason at using his footwork, using his pace. I think he looks stronger as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, which is like kind of jarring to say. And I think part of that's like just the mix of general footwork and balance, but along with the strength too. Like he's so good at, and I think sometimes he definitely gets away with push-offs, but as he is low on the list of push-off aggressors as far as I'm concerned in the league. I have a running list, by the way. Yeah, he's been the strength definitely pops with him.
Yeah, it's very, very, very impressive, the leaps that he's made throughout the course of this offseason, I think, as much as anything, right? Like, I think it's clear he has gotten way better, and I think that this is a real leap, and I think we're going to see that in the playoffs. Like, I think that we have obviously seen Donovan Mitchell have incredible playoff series in the past. He has been someone, the series against the Thunder stands out like vividly in my mind, right? That Russell Westbrook, Paul George series where he just kind of took it to them. And then obviously the duel against Jamal Murray in the bubble was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to get another one of those. I really, truly do. And if he does that with this team around him, I wouldn't dismiss them, is all I'm saying. Like, all of the indicators in terms of metrics say that they are a genuine high level elite team in the NBA this season. And because of that, I think that you have a guy who has a proven track record in the NBA. You have a great defense. You have a proven track record as a closer in the playoffs. That feels like a lot of boxes that they have ticked to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm very excited to see how it plays out, because this is a fun group. And like, part of what's fun to think about too is how much they have moving forward to be excited about. I love Cleveland. Cleveland's pretty great, in case you weren't aware.
Yeah, hot take. Guy who lives in Cleveland probably likes Cleveland. You're not even a Cavs fan, so I think we're good.
I'm not. If they go back to the 07 jerseys, I'll be a Cavs fan. Those are some of the best.
We're going to take that's amazing.
Just saying.
We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans and just what in the world is happening there, because I'm so confused. Okay, we're back. We're going to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans now. I don't understand this team, Mark. I don't get them. They've gotten healthier, getting Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum back. Brandon Ingram, over his last, what is it? What did I send you last night? It is over his last 10 games. He's averaging 27.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists on 50, 40, 85 shooting splits. This team has lost, I think, 7 of those 10 games. They have CJ McCollum, who it feels like has not been awesome during this stretch, if I'm being completely honest. But they're obviously without Zion Williamson, and they're a team that is very dependent on Zion Williamson in a lot of different ways. Before I get into some of my overall structural takeaways about New Orleans, what is your overriding feeling on the Pelicans right now, who are actually tied in a big group of 4 teams right now between 9 and 11, or I guess that'd be 9 and 12. I'm sorry, for the last play-in spot?
Overall feeling is sad. That's how I feel right now, because this team, like, I mean, what they were doing up until the end of December, early in January, was just like, it's the best the Pelicans have ever looked in my lifetime. And I like you mentioned, I don't want to just chalk it all up to injury. I think injury has really hurt their rhythm and their ability to go off of what was working for them earlier in the year. I mean, my biggest thing, as much as I love Brandon Ingram, love watching him play, I think he's been fantastic, especially like you mentioned over this last stretch. This team just does not create anything easy in the half court, and it's been a big problem for them. Like, everything is so difficult, and I think that's been hurt too by what the spacing is around their team. Like, we saw this be a real issue 2 years ago when Zion Williamson got hurt. Or when he missed the entire season, I should say, because 3 years ago when he was playing and was awesome? I'm trying to remember. It's the years run together. But point being, when Zion first was really popping off, looking like an all-NBA player, you saw how well some guys who, even if they had some spacing issues, they really were able to thrive off what they did. Like, Najee Marshall's a guy who's been so good playing alongside Zion Williamson, who can play off of him, having guys who can handle the ball outside of him, attack what he creates or attack gaps, just be smart moving without the ball. Even if they have shooting woes, like, it just clicks. It works. And I think when you go from what Zion's creating to what those advantages look like with BI and CJ, like, it's just so different. Like, I think defenses aren't impacted nearly in the same way. And as good as those guys are as contested shot makers, like, CJ hasn't had that level of year. I think it's been, like you mentioned, it's tapered back down a little bit lately, but he started off really cold for the year. I think it's been better overall in 2023. But I think with what their role players are, again, like, good role players, but they're role players who really thrive with Zion. It's not a roster built to be carried by Brandon Ingram. And I also don't think Brandon Ingram is capable of carrying them, to be honest. Like, I think that there was a stretch last year where his passing and ability to get into the paint was like, just at a level that we'd never seen before. It's not there right now. And I think that's not to be unfair to him like that. But I do kind of, like, it's one of the things where, like, I just wish you could get back to that. Like,
it's really interesting because I think that is the biggest problem with this team right now, is they don't have any way to pressure the paint unless it's like Jonas Valanciunas. Like, one of the things that, like, people talk about with the New Orleans Pelicans, the people around the team, the people that often are, in a case where they are as a beat writer for the team or a blogger, whatever you want to call them, and they go to press conferences and stuff. What Willie Green talks about is he wants this team to shoot more threes. He wants them to space the floor better. He wants them to play the math game more. This team is 27th in 3-point attempt rate this season. And he knows that and wants that to change. But the problem for them in terms of changing that, the best way to get open 3-pointers is by driving and kicking, collapsing defenses and spraying it out. They don't really have that first level of being able to do that, I think. CJ McCollum has improved as a distributor and playmaker, but he just doesn't really have the burst to beat guys off the bounce consistently. Brandon Ingram, it's just not like his idea. It's not what he does a lot of the time to like try and like get into the paint and like drive and kick. Like he wants to get into the paint and get to the mid range. He wants to get to the paint and or get into like the 15, 17 foot area. Right. I don't know. It just feels like they don't pressure the paint a lot. They don't really get that penetration. And that is something that will change when Zion Williamson comes back. There's arguably no better paint presence in the entire NBA. And I think on some level, this team was built with the idea of having Zion there and having that elite level paint pressure all the time that collapses defenses and opens things up for everyone else. But I do think that this showcases how difficult things are for the Pelicans without him. And just looking through the on-off numbers, looking at play-by-play stats right now, Daryl Blackport's great site, with Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Zion Williamson, the Pelicans are plus 14.9 in terms of net rating this season. With Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum without Zion Williamson, they are a negative 11.1 net rating this season, and that's in like 460 minutes. And the big difference there, I mean, look, they're terrible on both ends, but they only have a 110 offensive rating in those minutes with Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum without Zion Williamson. It's hard. I get that this team has been built for Zion Williamson, but they got to be able to play without him. And it feels like right now they're just really struggling to play without him.
Yeah, and I would add too, I think what my biggest struggle has been for them is the way their defense has kind of evaporated. Like it's not like it's the worst thing of all time, but it hasn't been nearly as good lately. And I think part of that is like when your offense dies down to this level, it's really hard to not get killed in transition, which I think they've struggled with, particularly when you're playing JV 20 to 25 minutes a game. It's not to be unfair to him, but like just any 7-footer, it's hard to be an effective half-court defense when you don't get set in the half-court. I think that's been a struggle for them. And their overall communication just hasn't been there like it was at the beginning of the year when their defense was really popping. Like I think part of it is it feels like they're always kind of trying new lineup combinations, but also like they'll play JV a little bit higher up, show, recover, and try and rely on backline rotations. But then like the tagger, the tagger will release early or late, or it's just always like a little bit offbeat and not right. And it's really killed them, like not being completely locked in on what they need. And I think they're just in a really tough spot of not having a go-to right now on either end, other than making tough shots. And they're not doing it at a high enough level for it to carry them.
Yeah, so I just pulled up Synergy right now. They are in a virtual tie for third worst in terms of percentage of their possessions that result in transition opportunities for the opposing team. 17.4% of their defensive possessions currently are transition possessions, which is really bad. It's really, really hard. And I would imagine, frankly, that number is worse over the last little while, as you said, because it does feel like that is often where they're getting beaten a lot of the time, is out in transition defense. And the thing that frustrates most fans is that lack of 3-point shooting, right? I get it. Like they have great shooters. Like Brandon Ingram can shoot the basketball. CJ McCollum can shoot the basketball. Trey Murphy is an absolute sniper from 3. They have guys that theoretically can really, really shoot. You would think they should be better, but they're just not. And this team might just desperately need Zion Williamson back to make the play-in tournament. And if they don't get Zion back, I honestly think that this is probably the worst team right now within that little race, at least in terms of how they're playing currently.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. And I think part of what's really frustrating and difficult too, that I understand from a fan perspective, like, it's been cool to see Kira Lewis get a little bit of run lately. Like that's been nice. And I think he's had some nice moments too, but it's more so like, okay, well, Dyson Daniels is just not playing anymore. Like he's out of the rotation. Part of that is because of the Josh Richardson trade. Like you make the move for Josh Richardson to bolster your rotation for a playoff run. Well, right now it's not a playoff run. Like I think And I don't know.
Well,
Like,
is Josh Richardson better than Dyson Daniels right now?
Yes and no.
I genuinely think it's like pretty close.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, that's what I'm saying. I think from a coaching perspective, I get exactly why Willie Green's going to say, okay, well, I'm going to play Josh Richardson. Like, that guy's a vet. He knows his role. He knows what he's going to do. But also, like, Dyson was playing well earlier this year. Like, he really brought good things. He fits what his team wants. He's bigger. I honestly would say he's a better defender than Josh Richardson. Like, Josh can do some good things, but largely I'd just rather put Dyson out there with what he does. Dyson's a better passer, moves the ball better. Like, no, he's not going to bring the same as a ball handler yet. I don't think. Like, he can do some stuff bringing it up the court. I don't think that he's the same way of like getting into the paint, but like Josh doesn't really get into the paint either. No, exactly. Like, I agree. Like, I'm just saying, like, that's part of the difficulty in like when you don't have a real lead guard and you're trying to figure some of that stuff out. It's difficult. That's probably the only like the biggest nitpick I would have with Willie Green right now. Like, just I would so much rather see Dyson out there. And who knows? Maybe there's stuff going on behind the scenes I don't know about. But
he played like 13 minutes last night. So like I would think that like he's playable. It's just what's going on. You know, why is that not a thing? And obviously they're missing, you know, Jose Alvarado is hurt right now as well. And like there are a number of things going on that you can point to. Larry Nance is out as well. Like I think he's out for another week, right?
Jackson Hayes has not been good. Like he tries, like he does some energy stuff, but I still just am really not there with where he's at right now.
Yeah, like it's funny. Like you look at Jackson Hayes' numbers versus Larry Nance's numbers, and you wouldn't really see much of a difference. But then you watch the games, and it's just like, oh my god, Larry Nance just structurally helps them defensively and helps their ball movement so much more every single time he's out there. I'm bummed for I agree with you. Like that overriding feeling of just being bummed is where I'm at on this. Yeah. Right.
And I really hope that they can just get back to something. Like I know Wendy reported the other day, or maybe it was just more got aggregated, but just that there was like no sight line on when Zion was going to come back. I just hope that goes away because I just miss watching that dude play. I hate the discourse around it whenever he's not playing. Clearly he was in shape this year. I don't know. I think if you're debating that, you can talk to a wall as far as I'm concerned, but like, it's just like seeing what this team had earlier in the year. And Steve Jones Jr., our friend, put this on Twitter. Like you still see moments of what they can do. Like you see the stuff that has been their bread and butter all year, and it pops and then it goes away again. And so I think again, like every time I watch this team, I'm just like, even watching them against the Kings last night, like I thought the first half you saw some good stuff, and then again as things got away from them in transition. Like I think the Kings are like that is like the worst possible matchup for them with how the Kings play. But it's frustrating, and I really hope that they can get back to it. Mainly just like that fan base deserves it, especially with what the beginning of this year looked like for them.
Yeah, no, I need this team to be good. I want to watch them be good. I want to watch Zion. And it's funny, like, you know, you're right. Like schematically, they are doing a lot of the same things. Steve is right. They're doing a lot of the same things, but it just has a lot less force when Zion like isn't the person running a lot of these actions, right? Yeah. Like you're running like dribble handoffs and like all due respect to Brandon Ingram, but like Brandon Ingram's like downhill force is just different than Zion's in a lot of different ways. And again, Brandon's been playing great, like offensively at the very least. It's just that it's not enough right now for this group.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Let's jump into 2023 NBA draft stuff. This will be fun. I'm really excited to talk about all of these guys that we're going to jump into. We're going to talk about 6 guys. We're going to compare them in pairs of 3, essentially. NBA draft battles, comparisons between 2 players, why we're higher on one guy versus another, what we see is like the differing factors between the 2 of them. And we're going to jump into this. Okay, Mark. The whole purpose and premise behind this for me was I wanted to break down Jordan Hawkins versus Gradey Dick. And they're floor spacers. They're guys who are going to generate high volume 3-point opportunities. They go about it entirely differently, I feel like, which is so interesting. And I think that honestly, like I do prefer one guy over the other, but I really, really like the other guy a lot. And I think that I'm probably higher on him than consensus. I think I'm probably higher on both of these guys than consensus, if I'm being completely honest.
Yep.
Okay. Mark, Gradey Dick or Jordan Hawkins? Let's just start with this base level thing. Which one do you prefer?
Oh, Gradey for sure. And I think that I want to follow that up too, just by saying the more I watch Jordan, the more I fall in love with him as a player and prospect. Like, I know you like him a lot too, and I'm excited to talk about him. But so I just want to say, it's not to say that I dislike Jordan. It's more like I think Gradey, calling him a sure bet or safe bet, feels like it undersells his upside and potential. But I think with what you look at what the floor is, how he's improved over the year, that's a guy who's just become a no-brainer upper lottery prospect for me, or close to upper lottery, I should say. I think top 10 lock for me is how I would put it.
I agree with you. I have Gradey Dick in my top 10. I really like Gradey Dick a lot. Do you think that there is a case for the way that Jordan Hawkins goes about creating his three-pointers, sprinting off of screening actions, finding different flare opportunities, just the way that he goes about it, sprinting to the line in transition, stopping, popping, and getting that open three? Do you think there is something about his ability to generate three-pointers that is potentially a bit more translatable than Gradey Dick, where Gradey Dick, a lot of his opportunities right now, he's not a bad movement shooter. I don't mean this by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's going to be a really good movement shooter long term. We haven't seen quite as much of it from him as Jordan Hawkins yet. Do you think there is a case that Jordan Hawkins will be able to shoot threes at volume a little bit easier than Gradey Dick?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the size is always going to play a factor for sure, and that's probably why people would consider Gradey a better shooter. But I mean, you can make a legitimate argument that Jordan's the best shooter in the draft. Like you mentioned, his difficulty, variety, everything on his threes is pretty ridiculous. And it's not just he's doing this and really being able to create things because of what other guys are opening up for him. It's self-creation without the ball in some ways, because he's so outlier in what he does as a movement threat. Something I wrote about a year or two ago, and I think ironically, on another UConn player and how that, played out for him. Obviously, Jordan Hawkins is so much better than James Bouknight with the way that he moves without the ball.
Oh yeah.
James was just a better. Well, I don't even know if I would say James was a better athlete, better vertical athlete. But in terms of the side to side stuff, I don't think it's super comparable. But point being, I'm there with you. I think that part of why I've gotten higher and higher on Jordan is you just don't find guys who are shooters like this. I think there's always this idea of you can just find somebody in the late first who can shoot. And who can shoot standstill or maybe lift and hit shots. But you do not find guys who can do this,
right,
who can legitimately hit shots out of every kind of set, every movement, and be good at every single variety while having some room to expand out from there. And I'm not saying I'm there yet, but he's a top 20 guy for me. And I don't think it's crazy if he maybe ends up a lottery guy.
Yeah, I have him at 17 right now, so I'm right in the middle of it. The next place I want to go to with this is defensively. I like Jordan. I like what Jordan can be defensively a little bit more than Gradey. They're very different defenders. Yeah. Gradey is a very smart team defender with great hands, great hand-eye coordination, who just seems to read and react to things that happen around him. But where I think he struggles is in dribble handoff or any sort of exchange, right? Where he has to communicate with a teammate essentially and make a rotation or make a switch or do something like that. Those are the areas where I think Gradey can get in some trouble. With Jordan, I think Jordan's really good with all of the communication stuff. And I think he's actually really aggressive. And on top of it, I think he moves his feet super well. The problem is that he just doesn't really have the base right now. He's not strong enough. He gets bullied a little bit too often. But at the point of attack, I actually think he's kind of underrated in terms of just being like an aggressor and being able to get into guys' spaces. How do you evaluate these two defensively, and which one do you think that you like a little bit better long term?
That's a good question. I think that one's where it's tough, and that's where the size stuff comes in because I think for Gradey, like you mentioned, like I think that there are things that he does really well defensively. I think that as he gets stronger and continues to improve with stuff, I'm interested to see what that means for him as he continues to improve. But I think Jordan, I hate saying underrated, but like Jordan is a legitimately very good college defender. And I think it's in a way
Yes.
that can translate. Like you mentioned, I think he needs to get stronger. And I'm curious, what organizations feel like they can get him to. Like what is a healthy weight for him that we can get him to? Like I think that's going to be a really big thing that organizations are looking at. Like he was like 175 as a freshman. He put on a decent amount of weight prior to this year. I think you've seen that play out and be a good thing for him. But like, okay, it's like how much more can we get out of him functional strength wise is going to be really important for sure. But like even when teams try and quote unquote go at him, I think he's been really good at standing up. Like he's a very solid on ball defender. He plays with higher functional strength than I think you would expect from somebody who's 185. And his team defense really impresses me too. Like he's so good on stunts and digs into the lane. If there's a loose handle, he's going to attack it. But I don't ever really feel like he's going too crazy out of bounds with it. He navigates screens well. Like I look at him as like, yes, if somebody can really like isolate a 6'8" guy on him and get him in the post, yeah, that's going to be a problem. But like, do you know how much shit you have to go through to actually make that happen? I feel like that's so much more difficult to actually do as an offense and have it work out in the way that matters replicably than people give it credit for. Like
it's for me, the ones that worry me are if you just like have him on ball and you can like come up and run a screen with Kawhi or someone like that.
Yeah.
Maybe not even Kawhi, maybe someone who's like not as strong as Kawhi, even like Jason Tatum, right? Like I would run like a 1-3 ball screen with Marcus Smart and Jason Tatum and try and get a switch with Hawkins onto Tatum. And I think that Hawkins would struggle with Tatum's strength even right now.
For sure.
At this point. Gradey Dick, though, I think is like, I don't think Jordan Hawkins is going to be a magnet once he gets up to like 205, 210 in terms of, teams are going to like sprint at him and try and like get their best player on him. I do think Gradey Dick on the ball, particularly, and by running him through a lot of exchanges, could end up being a little bit of a target. Now, I think he's really sharp as a team defender. I think he's really smart. And I think that like, there will be ways around that in a lot of ways, but I worry about him on defense more than I worry about Jordan on defense. Ultimately, the thing that makes me side with Gradey here is I think Gradey is just way better offensively as an overall prospect. I think that the shooting is going to end up being very close. I think Jordan is better at driving volume right now from the 3-point line because of his movement. But I think that Gradey's super high release point is going to be an enormous factor as he continues to move up levels and continues to get better and better off of movement. I also think Gradey is just more comfortable putting the ball on the ground and getting all the way to the basket. I think a lot of the stuff I see with Jordan isn't quite getting all the way to the basket. I think Gradey is a little bit more comfortable right now, getting all the way there and actually making passing reads off of it. I do think Jordan's like a little bit of an underrated passer, not like an incredibly underrated passer, but he does show like the occasional high level read that I think he probably doesn't get enough credit for.
Yeah.
But with Gradey, I think Gradey can just like pass. Like he throws like one-handed live dribble passes while attacking closeouts. And I'm just like, oh, like that's going to work at the next level. Like that's going to just be really valuable.
Yeah, I agree. I think I might even be a little bit higher on Jordan as a passer. Like I think that I'm not expecting him to like run an offense or anything like that. But I think like obviously like this is a guy who even if he gets run off the line, I tend to trust him to make the right decision. Like I think a lot's going to depend, like you mentioned, on for me a lot of it's going to be strength. And again, like that's a buzzword, but like continue to improve his strength because I think that's his biggest thing getting downhill right now.
Yeah, with him, it really is all of like that is the swing skill. Like I actually think he can handle the ball now, like
Yeah,
in a
like I
pretty
think the handle
reasonable
is solid
level.
for him. Like he really
Yeah.
like if he gets run off the line, like he started to do some more stuff like, okay, what if I snake this? What if I, try and use my body a little bit to find an angle? And I think that's where you've seen some of his best passing stuff come out of. Like he's shown
Yep.
ability to handle some traps and doubles. Like I really believe in what he does with how he
Well,
sees the court.
yeah, for me, it's like the ability to maintain that advantage is
Yeah,
his
exactly.
problem.
Like he's not going to create the
Like,
advantage, but like I think he can maintain it.
well, no, I think it's the opposite. I think he
Oh, okay.
struggles to maintain it. Like, I think that the strength guys can kind of get back into the play more than anything else. I think that that is his problem. Like, he gets the advantage through the gravity of his shooting, and then he'll attack a closeout or something. And if someone can get back and just like physically bump him or something like that, it kind of just completely arrests his momentum in terms of getting downhill.
Yeah, that's fair. I think for me, as the years gone on, I feel like he's like again, like the finishing hasn't been amazing, but I think he's been better at getting downhill as the years gone on. And I like at least to me, like just with the stuff that we're talking about, maybe this is an incorrect read, but like for me, this is the stuff that I feel if you are somebody who has like is a hard worker, like obviously again, that's stuff that I can't gauge, that's stuff that a team has to gauge, but like I view that as stuff that can be repped out and worked on and improved
Yeah.
as a guy again, like gets stronger, gets more reps. And I think like with having a bankable skill with the level of shooting he has and being a guy who competes his ass off defensively and does pretty well, like I think that I like am pretty bullish on that being something that can really improve. Not that I think he's gonna be a star,
Yeah.
but like I think that there's like real value in him becoming a guy who can just continue advantages, be a high level floor spacer. I just see that with him.
Which of these two do you think has more star equity?
Star equity? Oh wow. See, that's tough because that's a different question than just like outright better prospect.
Yeah, I mean it's like a piece of the puzzle, but it's like not the puzzle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would. I think somebody would disagree with me, but I would say Jordan Hawkins. I think that Jordan, like, there's a legitimate chance where, like, if things just really pop, like, with, like, I mean, just being a guy who can shoot at that volume with that quickness, with that movement, like, I don't want to, yeah, I think that I would go with Hawkins.
So the case for Gradey would be: do you think there is any like Klay Thompson-y offensive upside with him? Just high release point, quick release, being able to get it off that way. Like that's the star upside for Gradey would be like Klay Thompson offensively, right?
I
Or
think
the
it's,
vision at least. I'm not
yeah,
saying like that's what it will be, but like
yeah.
that's what people
No, I get what you're
envision with.
saying. I think that is possible. Because I'm trying to think of like a different lane I would even go with him because I feel like I mean I never watched Clay at Wazoo. I wasn't around for
Mhm.
that, but I think the like if there's something there where he can. One thing I've thought about with him is like obviously if the handle can tighten up a little bit, like I think that really needs to happen for him to get better at getting downhill. But also too, like you mentioned with the high release point, like okay, what if he does become a guy who can mix in drives with post ups, like mix in like finding ways to crab
Yep.
dribble, use my shoulder, find ways to get to that high release point. And I feel like he's a guy who has such good touch that you can believe in that. So I think I could see that and feel like solid about what that could be. I don't have like a direct comp in my mind or anything, but I think like that's definitely possible for him.
Yeah, it's interesting because that is something that Clay like really took advantage of, especially like by the midpoint of his career with the Warriors, was that ability to get to that post spot and just shoot over the top. And you're right, like that could be the thing for Gradey to like be able to do it. This one is a little bit closer than I thought
Yeah.
going into this. I will say that. And I'm glad we did this. I think that right now, based off of the size and based off of my concerns about Hawkins's frame, I would lean Gradey Dick
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
And
And
I
I
think
think I would agree with that.
but look, this is like what teams do. Like they sit around and like they literally bring up two guys and they're just like, hey, we need to talk through these two guys. Why this guy over the other guy? Right. And I think that as you talk through it more, sometimes you get some really interesting insights. And I think this is one of those examples where, as we've talked through it more, I'm just like, oh, maybe Jordan Hawkins is like a top 15 guy, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe there is a little bit of that. Okay. Next up, we are going to go Taylor Hendricks against Jarice Walker, two guys in the American Athletic Conference, two guys that are very high-end defensive prospects, 6'8" to 6'9", somewhere in that range. Good length. Jarice Walker has like a 7'2" wingspan. I've seen different numbers for Taylor Hendricks' wingspan to where I don't really want to throw out an exact number, but he seems long at the very least. Very different offensive roles. Mark, where do you fall on these two prospects?
It's not close for me, to be honest. Like I really like Taylor Hendricks, but like Jarice is a guy who like I have gotten to the like I would be comfortable potentially taking him like 5. Like I love Jarice. I think he's a better defensive prospect. I think what's tough is like I think you can look at Taylor and be like, well, maybe he's more of a plug and play guy with what he can do offensively. I think you have to build Jarice into your offense quite a bit more, but I also think there's a lot more upside for me with what Jarice brings offensively. It's like I don't know. I'm trying to think through it more because I know there are people who are a lot higher on Taylor than me. You included. Like I'm comfortable with him going lottery. I think I had him like 16th on my last mock, but yeah, I'm just like, it's more so like, I think Jarice is like that dude rather than like being out on Taylor.
I really like Jarice. I have him at 7 on my board. I'm a little bit higher on Jarice. I think that the big differentiator between these two, I think you would agree, is like just the ability to put the ball on the deck.
Yeah,
right.
100%. And I think his overall feel for the game is a little better than Taylor's for me. Like Taylor's is solid, like don't get me wrong, but I think Jarice, like especially over the last month or two, as you've seen him like really settle into what he's doing at Houston, I think for me, I would be a little bit comfortable, more than comfortable saying that I feel better about his feel for the game.
Yeah, I do too, for what it's worth. Like I'm 100% there. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting for me. Because like handle, I like Jarice. Feel, I like Jarice. I think Jarice's defensive instincts overall are a little bit better as well.
Yeah. And his versatility. Like I think Taylor has versatility, but like Jarice is like that shit is special, man. Like I think he's a game-changing defensive prospect.
I'm closing in on that him having that upside, but I don't know if I'm like 1,000% there yet. Okay. And this is the reason that I ask that question. Which one do you like athletically more? Because that is where I struggle, because Taylor is just twitchier, right? Like he is quicker. He's laterally quicker. I think his hips are better in general. I think that he can flip his hips and like be able to slide, and like his overall lateral ability, I think, is a little bit better. Jarice, he lives and dies off of his reactions, right? Like his brain is so fast on that end that I feel like it often is really, really impressive. Do you think that Jarice will find success guarding like the quickest twos in the NBA? Because that's, you'll see where I'm going with this in a second. Do you think that is something that he can do effectively?
I think so. Like you're not just going to put him outright, be like, oh, go guard Klay Thompson. Like I don't think that's going to be a thing.
No.
But
like he'll struggle running off of screening actions, I think. Like, but in terms of like if he gets put onto an on-ball switch in a ball screen situation, and that's just like defend on an island.
Yeah, I think that I have faith in him doing that. Like I would agree. Like I don't think that his hips are the best. I think there is a little bit of stiffness there, but his technique and explosiveness is so good. And I do wonder sometimes, and this is maybe I'm just like so in love with who Jarice is right now and who he can be that I underlook it. Cause like, again, like I've just been so in on him for like 2 years. Like I always think about him. Like, but and like, just as an aside, like it's the same thing I had with Malachi Branham. Like you watch this guy do something, like the first time you see them, you're like, I don't know if I see it. And then, you watch them 2 months later in a different setting. You're like, okay, I get it. And then they just keep growing, keep improving. And like you saw what Jarice did the first month of the season, which was rough. Like never forget the Oregon game. Good God. But like looking at now, like I think again, like I think it's the kind of thing I would have undersold in the past, being like, oh, well, I can teach somebody technique. They can improve on that, instead of going like, oh, well, I look at Jarice and I'm like, that's a guy who right now I think you can trust to play multiple schemes, who I do think is going to be able to hang up on stuff. Like, I do think, like, again, like he's going to have some issues against smaller guards, but even then, like, I think that he's so good in what he does and being aggressively sound too, that I would trust him in a lot of situations.
Okay, so I'm with all of that, and I agree with you. Like, I think that his overall, I don't know, do you want to call it like technique or like whatever you want to say it is, has gotten way better since he's been at Houston, just in terms of, I'm trying to put like one simple word on it in terms of what I'm talking about. But it's his ability to react rotationally, his ability to see everything a step before it happens, his ability to communicate and like understand exchanges and things like that. All of this has gotten better, right? I think it's gotten drastically better. It's gotten better for Taylor Hendricks at UCF, but as we know, development is not linear. And I think that it's possible that Jarice has gotten, frankly, like maybe the best defensive coaching in the country from Kelvin Sampson in that Houston situation, as compared to Hendricks, who might still have a little bit more upside defensively. And look, like part of this is me playing devil's advocate. Like, let's be clear about this. Like I'm trying to pull things out during conversations as much as anything, right? Do you think that Taylor Hendricks maybe athletically, once he fills in, because like Jarice is not getting any bigger with his frame, right? Like this is who Jarice is physically. At least I would hope. I would hope he doesn't get bigger, because I think that is where we really start to see diminishing returns. Do you think that there is potentially some upside for Taylor Hendricks in terms of improving his frame a little bit and getting like real NBA level schematic coaching that could see him surpass Jarice in any way?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I think he has some good lateral quickness and ability. I probably am just a little bit lower on it than you right now. What that could be versatility wise. Like, I think it could be really interesting as like a switching onto some wings and in the front court. And the rim protection stuff is really awesome. Like, that has been super fun to watch. I mean, based on what he does with his back foot explosiveness, he has a lot more to offer as a rim protector than Jarice. I don't know. I think I value the technique and what Jarice brings as being able to do everywhere. Well, also, like, I think to me, like, Jarice, in the same way that Jalen Duren did at times last year, is like a guy I look at as like teams have done so much to try and remove him from the equation, and he still finds ways to blow shit up. Like, that stuff is like, I geek out on that. Like, I love that. And I think, like, obviously Taylor has had those moments too, but I think Jarice has done that so repeatedly and routinely for me this year, that I would probably still lean him, even upside wise.
Offensively, are you just like in on Jarice Walker's shot at this point?
Yeah, I don't like. That's a good question. I think like no, but I think, and this is one where it's like I want to go back and watch Taylor stuff from AAU and everything, and because if I remember, I mean, he came in billed it as a 3-point shooter and like having this ability to space the floor. Like, because Jarice's shot went from like, I mean, you saw what that thing was like 2 years ago to where it is now. And I think, again, that's part of the thing where like I want to do, I'm at the place where I need to do like more intel stuff. Like, that's the kind of thing I never really thought about before, but I'm at the place where like I find things out because of people I talk to, you know, like I've only heard like insane things about Jarice's work ethic and the way that he's improved. And like, I see that on court. I'm like, I see that, like, I see how that's applied. That's the stuff I want to know more about with Taylor. Cause like then now because that's what I'd apply to, like, okay, well, what about his handle? Like, can that stuff, like, what is his mindset like on trying to improve that? And, I think with that really long-winded way of saying, yes, I think I'm in on Jarice's shot and where it's headed. and how it's continued to improve this year. I don't think he's ever going to get to be like a movement threat. But I do think like, can he become a pick and pop guy who has to get guarded and who can face up and attack and drive? And I think he's shown some really interesting stuff with that over the last couple weeks. So like their game against Tulane, oh my God. He had a couple of drives that were just like, man. But I think I am there with it.
So again, this is just me playing devil's advocate because I'm trying to pull some things out, right? With Jarice, do you think that there is a chance that he is, if the shooting does not come along for him, like he was I think he's shooting like 36% from three right now and a couple of possessions per game. Is there a case that Jarice is basically a small ball big as opposed to being like a 4 that you can play next to a non-shooting 5? Because look, while we all want like shooting 5s, they're not the easiest things to find.
Yeah.
Does that potentially, if you don't believe in the shot, does that potentially limit Jarice Walker into being more of a small ball 5?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it does. Like if the shot doesn't come around, I think that does limit his pathways, but also like I think part of what's important is like what team drafts him, how are they going to use him, what do they want from him? And I think luckily like he's a guy where if he were coming out 5 years ago, like 10 years ago, I think that I have a much different feeling on him as a prospect. But on who he is right now, and like I think a team could use him and be like, all right, we see the vision in making you this guy who is just a menace on the short roll, who shores up so much for us defensively and gives us a ton of lineup versatility in what you can bring and how you can unlock some things for us. And I think, again, like I do think if the shot doesn't come around, like it definitely hinders what he can be, but I'd still be pretty high on what he can be as a small ball big.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that just like makes it a little bit harder, right?
Definitely.
Just pulling up Taylor Hendricks' numbers. I have like 16 games of him on Synergy, it looks like, from AAU and from his Calvary Christian days as well. And it looks like something like 30% from three in those games. So I'll have to go back and like look through that as well to see, are there signs here? Was there like a line of demarcation that showed improvement, right? Look, I'm with you. I have Jarice ahead of him. And as much as everything I've been like parsing through here, the goal here is to try and learn.
Yeah.
Right. And with Taylor, which just worries me, is like I don't feel great about him. Like I actually feel a little bit better about Taylor as like a weak side rim protector than Jarice. And I feel a little bit better about him moving away from the rim. But I feel worse about the overall instincts defensively and like his scramble ability and his IQ in terms of like team structures and communication and things like that. I don't think that is quite as impactful as what Jarice brings to the table. Offensively, like I'm just willing to bet on Jarice like finding the swing skill that is shooting, because if he does, he's going to be like an immensely impactful four-man. I have Jarice at number 6 or 7 right now on my board. I am a big fan of Jarice.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I do want to say on Taylor too, like, he's like, cause yeah, I'm looking to just at Cerebro, like he has seen a real shooting bump. He went from a guy who like 15U and stuff just was not shooting threes to now like has obviously become who he is. So that's definitely something I want to go back and look at. But I'm right there with you with Jarice. Like I'm a believer.
Okay, last one for the day, Mark. Colby Jones at Xavier, a guy that I have in the top 25 currently, versus Terrence Shannon Jr. at Illinois, a guy that I previously had in the top 25 and am cooling on a little bit, while also acknowledging that I think these two are pretty close and in the same tier for me, I think.
Yeah. Shout out to Colby Jones, man. Like this is a guy who, and I think you can say this for both, and I would say it for both, but for Colby, like went from a guy who's like, maybe like his entire college career has always done exciting things. Like for anybody who, I know you do this too, and like doing a stats query, seeing who pops, like Colby Jones is a guy who is like always on stats queries. He gets steals, he gets blocks, he passes the ball really well. That pops. And this year, like, I think the biggest line of demarcation is going to be how people actually feel about a shot, because I think
Yep.
I'm probably less bullish on it than where I've seen a lot of people at. Like, yes, he is shooting 40% this year. It's on pretty low volume. It's mostly open stuff. It's not really a lot of pull-ups. And that's like, I'm not expecting him to be a pull-up shooter at all at the next level. It's more just like, okay, how confident is he? Is this, or, are those more indicators of touch, like this and that? But that's just such a big improvement for where he has been. The willingness has been improved over his last 2 years. And that's unlocked so much of what he does as just a really high level player who can connect the offense, and not even just connection. Like, I think his secondary scoring is really exciting. Like, his touch around the basket is really good. I do worry, like, I don't want to say I worry about it, but like, he's fairly below the rim as an athlete compared to,
totally.
yeah,
I think he is.
which I do think, like, I would say, like, he's listed at 6'5". I think he's like a full 6'6". Like, he's pretty big.
No, he's big. Yeah. Colby looks big.
Yeah. But I think, like, that's, for me, he's a guy who I very much look at. I'm like, okay, I do wonder a little bit more about, like, if the shot isn't this level, or if this is a guy who's shooting like 35%, 36%, and it's still on low volume, what does that really mean? How does that impact him? How does that impact the way that he's playing? Because I do think that makes a big difference. Like, again, like, the passing is really good. The secondary pick and roll stuff is really exciting. He plays really well in transition, but I do just wonder, like, okay, what does this look like when teams A aren't really guarding him as a threat, and B, if he's having to deal with better rim protection?
Yeah, I think that, like, what I struggle with Colby occasionally, and this is a guy that, like, I've been high on since he was a freshman. Like, I've been calling him out as like a potential draftee and like first round pick for 2 years now, 3 years, I guess, 3 draft cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Is he good enough at any single thing? Right? Like, he's a good passer, but like, he's not like bending defenses, right? Like, where his passing will be effective at the NBA level is attacking closeouts. But if there's no threat of the shot, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Right. Like, is he able to do that? Like, that's how he can get into the paint in general.
Can I ask you a fun question here?
Yeah.
Better Xavier prospects, Colby Jones or Najee Marshall?
Colby Jones. I don't even think it's really all that close. What do you think?
Okay.
I was not all that high on Najee.
See, I was a sicko. I love Najee. I thought Najee was really exciting.
Yeah.
It's just interesting because I think they're going to have a lot of things that we've seen play out with Najee are going to be the same things that we see play out with Colby, to a degree. And I think that is just, I don't know, it's something interesting to look at moving forward for sure.
I think Colby is, it's like, I don't want to like be unfair and say he's like a more cerebral player, because like Najee is not a dumb player. Like, he's very reactive on the court. Like, yeah, like he plays and goes and just has like a natural instinct for how to make shit happen on the court. Right. With Colby, it does feel like a little bit more cerebral, and he has to be, because he's not the athlete that Najee is. That's the key difference between these two.
Yeah, exactly. And Najee's a little bit bigger too. So I think that's where it's like, it just like you see some of the limitations for sure.
So here'd be my next question. Do you think that Najee plays as big as Colby does defensively?
It's a good question. I think, because I've always looked at Najee as a guy like Torrey Craig to me. Like, I think there's like always this notion that like Torrey Craig is good guarding big wings. He's like fine guarding big wings. I've always thought he's better in what he can do guarding like twos, or like being somebody who is kind of more of a chaser who can be big around screens, because he's really good at doing that. And I think that's what Najee excels at. I think Colby is much better at like being a roamer, being somebody who can blow up plays with his physicality and guard somebody on ball a little bit more. So I would say, like, yeah, I think Colby plays bigger. But again, like, that's part of the difficulty too. Like, all right, well, if he's more of a 3 and he's like playing up and he has to deal with, my Moose is excited to talk about Colby Jones too. But like, if you have to deal with that at the next level and deal with the more physicality, I do, like, again, I think I just keep coming back to the finishing.
Well, it's interesting because I think that with Colby, where the issues come into play is just like with the explosiveness and athleticism a lot of the time. And with Najee, it was more on the shooting side, right? Like I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, Najee's touch was so bad.
Straight up
so
did not
bad.
buy him as a shooter. I bought everything else with Najee. It was just like, I think there's no way this guy will shoot the ball point blank, right? And he hasn't really shot the ball in the NBA.
Yep.
But he's been so good at everything else that he's been able to make an impact. And yeah, it's tricky because on the other side, you have Terrence Shannon, who's just like a drastically different player, right? Terrence is trying to get downhill. He's trying to get to the rim. He is as opposed to being Colby, who is more of I will take the shots as they come to me guy. Terrence is aggressive in trying to hunt his shot right now. Which one of these two do you think is better defensively, Terrence Shannon or Colby Jones?
I would. That's tough. I think I really like Colby, but like I love Terrence. Like I think Terrence, what he can do with the way that he covers ground, because like we're talking about Colby and Terrence are such different athletes. Like Terrence is so explosive, he's so strong. Like again, somebody who plays way bigger than his listed size. And I think like to me, like the athletic difference is probably the biggest thing that probably propels Terrence a little bit ahead for me over Colby. So I would feel a little bit better about what his role in the NBA as a defender looks like. And that's not to say that I dislike Colby as a defender. Like I think Colby's a very good, very sound defender, but I think like I see what Terrence does having like a more concrete role and impact at the next level.
It's just explosiveness, right? Like even just like that first step explosiveness to be able to slide, that first step, like lateral, like burst when he has to try and cut someone off. That's real. That's a real differentiator between these two, between Terrence and Colby. And I think that's going to be a real differentiator moving forward for them as prospects in general. Look, Colby is the exact kind of player that I overrate every year. And I want to be very clear about this. Guys that are probably slightly athletically deficient in terms of explosiveness, but have fast brains and seem to rotate and like react to things around them very quickly and have super high basketball IQ. I don't know. Like, do you think Colby is a below average athlete by NBA standards?
I think I want to say no, but I think the answer is yes.
If like you have to think about it, in your case, Mark Schindler, the answer is yes.
Well, yeah, because I was going to deliberate and say, like, I think by virtue of him being 6'5", 6'6", yeah. Like, if he were 6'8", I'd feel pretty comfortable about where he's at as an athlete, but he's not 6'8", and that makes it hard.
And I do think he's like 6'6" for what it's worth. Yeah. Like, I don't think he's 6'4.5". I think he's big, and that will help him, but I don't know. Like, I feel like Terrence is probably going to have more success defending on the perimeter and Colby's going to have more success guarding up the lineup. And like, I just think that when they're both the same size, I'd rather have the guy that can defend on the perimeter a little bit more than the guy who's going to defend on the backside a little bit more. Do you buy any other skill? Like, what do you buy for Terrence offensively as a skill? Because like with Colby, we can say, we like the touch. We think he has potential to shoot a little bit more at volume. We love the passing. We love the feel. What do you like about Terrence outside of his ability to just, run in transition and just wreak havoc, right?
His drive game is so good. And like, he has like some real mid-range sauce too, which like, not that that's everything, but I do think like if you run him off the line, like, and I think that's been his biggest improvement this year for me, has been just his feel for the game is so different from where it was last year. I never thought he was a bad feel for the game player. He was always somebody who I felt was like solid, like not somebody who blew me away. It was more about how he saw the defensive end. But even then, like, I think this year, like the passing, I think the assist number undersells what his passing's been this year at times. Especially like live dribble stuff, getting downhill is where you see him make really good, really, really quality, like live dribble reads. So to me, yes, the driving, and I think that there is some shot stuff off the driving. I think you're going to disagree with me this. I believe in Terrence more as a shooter than I do in Colby Jones.
Yeah. Look, I believe in him more as a shooter than Colby Jones because I tend to believe in guys that are just that confident to fire.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
But I don't know if I believe in him as a shooter either.
Yeah, I don't know, like exactly. Like I'm not sure I quote unquote believe in him as a shooter, but like I think I buy him becoming a guy who shoots 35 or 36% on threes. If he can like this year, what he's done to go from like again, like the shot really improved last year just in terms of like how he got it off. This year it's just like the unloading, like just being willing to take anything and everything, regardless of how contested he is. Like to me, that matters almost more than how efficient he is as a shooter. Like,
Yep.
because the way that he gets guarded, like you just have to close out on him. Like every team closes out on him. And I don't know. I just buy what he brings with that. I believe in what that can be at the next level.
So I'm glad you brought up the driving because I think that is the thing that I've been most impressed with Shannon is just like that ability to get downhill, right? The problem with that though is that everything he does is at 100%, like 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
There is no changing of gears, no changing of pace, and it just feels so aggressive. And like I think that this is where he gets in trouble. Like he turns the ball over a lot. He has like a ton of player control fouls. Like I don't think because he's going 100 mile an hour, I don't think that he always reads the court well. Like I think that's where the passing stuff breaks down for me is he doesn't take the time to survey what's happening around him. He's a like skilled enough athlete in terms of his body control and things to where I think this is like developable maybe, but we haven't seen it yet. And it's been 4 years in college from Terrence. Right. So like, I think that's what worries me. And Terrence is also like 23 because I believe that he did a prep year at IMG. Does that sound right to you?
I don't think he did. I'm pretty sure he didn't. He went to Lincoln Park in Chicago. I don't think he went to IMG.
No, he went to IMG. Yeah.
He did?
Terrence went to IMG.
Damn. Okay, I didn't know that. Interesting.
But all of this is to say that, and look, he turned 23 in July. Like he's not yet 23, just, because the people will come at me and yell at me. The thing that worries me with him is just like, we're past the point where like, I think he should have developed this skill of being able to slow down on some level, right? Maybe he just didn't get the reps at Texas Tech. Like you can certainly make that case. That program is not a thing. And maybe that is the real differentiator here between the two. Now that we've finally seen Terrence get some freedom, we're seeing him blossom in a real way. But are those reps? This is a conversation we always have. Are those reps that you can get back? And will he have enough rope to like continue to like play out the string? Right.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. Like I honestly, I don't have a great answer on that. I think I tend to just look at it as I buy what this improvement has been this year. I think it was really tough with, like you mentioned, like Texas Tech's offense is just, God, I hate it.
It's terrible. Like, it hasn't even been good. It wasn't good when Beard was there even. Like it's bad.
Yeah, and I don't think it really did all that much for him as a prospect in terms of trying to figure things out. And I think, again, like you mentioned, I think that I feel better taking more stuff from what it's been like Illinois. I don't expect him to be a guy who carries tons of usage at the next level. I think that would be ludicrous. But I think to me, like I can see him playing. You can see some of the things he's doing in his role that make sense at the next level. And again, I don't know how to feel about the age or how to weigh that and what to take away from it. But I just buy enough of what the improvement has been this year to feel like that stuff can come, because but I don't want to say that like, his ability to find his pacing, that just couldn't come at Texas Tech. Like, I don't believe that, but I do think, like you're mentioning, like,
no, I actually do. Like, I kind of believe that a little bit.
Yeah. It's like, it's really hard to find that in some offenses and what the environment was like. And so I think like that's the kind of thing too. I feel like it takes quite a bit of time for some guys, especially guys who haven't always been like on ball dominant, to figure out. So I think that that's possible. It'll definitely be a big swing thing for him to get to.
Yeah, no, I'm going to be really interested. Okay. So let's just ask the question at the end here. This is a prospect battle, of course. Terrence Shannon or Colby Jones?
Terrence Shannon.
I actually think you've swung me on this a little bit more than what I thought. I have to do the deeper.
Yeah.
I haven't done the Colby Jones draft guide profile yet, and I have
Yeah.
done the Terrence Shannon one. And when I did the Terrence Shannon one, I was just like, this guy is super inconsistent, and it drives me a little bit crazy from time to time. But you can see the vision, right? Like you can see what this looks like. I need him to slow down way more. I need him to just like be a more effective finisher in the half court.
I do want to say not to, and this is not me just continuing to try and go to bat for Terrence, but
yeah,
I would say he's improved as a finisher this year. Like he went from a guy who could really only drive with one hand, to a guy who really has been able to drive and finish with both. It doesn't always look pretty, but like he went from being a guy who just like could not drive with his other hand.
He can drive with the right hand now. He can't finish with the right hand.
Yeah.
That's the next part of it. But you're right. Like he was a pure left-hand driver previously. Honestly, now it's like pretty close to 50-50 in terms of his drives. Like he's pretty comfortable putting it in his right hand. But even when he puts it in his right hand, he's still trying to go inside hand finish every time.
Definitely.
So it is, there's a lot there. And you can see the vision with Terrence Shannon. I need to return to this maybe after I do the Colby Jones like draft guide like deep dive and really feel a little bit better about this. But as of right now, Mark, I think you've swung me. I think that this is a good one.
Did I ever tell you about what happened the one time that I just speaking on Terrence? Actually I have like a really bad history. Sounds like I did something wrong, but like I have a really bad like timing with how I talk about prospects. I did like this like 2-hour long pod, which is very me, but like with a friend who now works for the Grizzlies, talking about Terrence and why he fit the modern NBA and why he made sense. This was 2 years ago. And he announced 10 minutes after we were done recording that he was going back to Texas Tech for the next year. And then there was this one sucked. I had just done like, and again, I think like 2 weeks later, I did a big thing on Roko Precaution the year when it looked like he was going to be really good. And then some random no-name account, no followers, no profile picture, like replies to my pod that he's not entering the draft. And I was like, well, what the hell are you talking about? Who are you? Like, where are you seeing this? Obviously didn't get a reply or anything. And then he pulled out like 2 days later, got a reply from the account like, oh yeah, I'm a friend of his dad's. Like I knew that this was going to happen. Like, all right, man, like Jesus Christ, like it happens. But yeah, it's a small story time.
No, I mean that stuff happens. Look, it's miserable. I really, it's the whole reason that like I try and wait now on all of those guys that like are on the fence about declaring or not declaring for the draft, because I just like I don't want to run into that. My time is a mess as it is. I can't really spend time on stuff that fails me. I get 1 or 2 every year though. 1 or 2 draft guide profiles every year. Do you remember the year that like Kofi Coburn was like, I'm 100% in the draft, and then randomly
I do remember that.
Pull out.
Yeah, that was so wild when he was like, oh, I'm done now. Like I was like, oh wow, cool. Yeah, that stuff is always random. And we're about to hit that, which is going to be exciting, especially with the transfer portal. Like I think it's underclassmen can start declaring for the portal next week. So
this week
it's this week.
No, underclassmen. You're right.
Yeah, because I know it was upperclassmen can do this week, but underclassmen next week. So it's like that's going to be wild.
Yeah, we got Chris Ledlam in the portal already. It's great. We've got who else do we have here? Stephen Clark from the Citadel, second team all SoCon baby. I've been diving deep into stuff already. This is where I'm at. Chris Ledlam is like the guy that will be he'll be a high major guy next year. Have you watched any of Roko Precaution highlights in Spain yet, or any tape from him in Spain?
I don't want to talk about it. It's been very bad. It's been very bad.
Look, I don't think it's been like very, very bad. I think that like,
compared to where, it's just like compared to where it was 2 years ago, it's like, it's been distressing.
early on, it was rough. I think that he is starting to show some improvement for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Like, you look at the numbers, like he's shooting like over 50% from the field now. He's just not shooting threes anymore. And like, what is the role and like, how do you make this work at the end of the day? He looks like a non-prospect to me right now, unfortunately. But hey, we will always have the 2021 NBA Draft Combine.
Never forget, because God, that rocked. I was so in on him, man. I was such a believer, and yeah, here we are. But it happens.
It was a mistake to not come out that year. He was always the guy that had some questions, I thought, and he probably should have went before those questions became set in stone in terms of weaknesses. All right, Mark. I don't really have anything movies wise that I've watched.
I saw Creed 3.
Oh no, I still haven't seen it yet.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk about it next.
We'll talk about it next week. I will go see it this weekend.
Also, the only other thing, I started watching The Whale today. Have you seen it?
No, I just don't care, I think.
Yeah, I understand. I kind of wish that I hadn't started it. Like Brendan Fraser is really good in it, but it's dark. But the biggest thing is more like it is literally dark. Like it is whoever shot this and like did the cinematography. Like I've never had an issue with brightness on my TV. I have like adjusted my brightness to the max on my TV and it's still dark. Like it is. I think like maybe what they were going for was like, oh, well, like you're supposed to see this guy who like never leaves his house. And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, but I still need to see what the hell's going on my screen. Like it's a little much for me. Like I appreciate wanting to be like fully invested in making this a thing, but what if I could still see what's happening? But yeah.
Hot take. Make your things capable of being seen. That would be nice. Look, I've been rewatching the John Wick movies.
Nice.
So I'm just like in preparation.
I can't wait for the next
4.
one. Cannot wait.
Yeah. So Laura and I will watch the third one tonight. We watched the first 2 over the last 3 days. I mean, just the best movies, just the absolute best movies. I actually swear to God, people, I will have a top 100 on Thursday now. This is actually happening. I just have to find out. I've written most of the copy. I just have to finish the copy. I have the top 100 rankings like set in stone, like in the article. We're all straight. I promise you will get my top 100 draft rankings on Thursday. Period. What else? Wrote something with James Edwards today on the Pistons, as James and I alluded to on the podcast on Saturday. Please go read that and subscribe to everything you can. Wrote a scouting report on Xavier Cook's signing with the Washington Wizards over at The Athletic as well with Josh Robbins. You should absolutely go read that. I'm a general believer in Xavier Cooks. Have you watched much of him yet, Mark?
I have not.
Yeah, interesting player, like really, really interesting player. Does everything but shoot. One of those classic guys, and we'll see where it plays out. Also just very skinny, and we'll have to figure out how he can rebound and manage with anchoring and things like that. But fast brain player, winning plays player, really big fan of his. That's all I've got. Mark, tell the people where they can find your work.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MG_Schindler. I should have some really cool and exciting stuff coming out soon. I think I wrote, Jesus Christ, at least 10,000 words over the last 3 days, including 5,000 over the last 24 hours. So I am very ready to like never look at my laptop again, even though I have another deadline tomorrow night. So it's one of those weeks, but it's good, man. I'm excited. Like literally, what the project is. It's something I've been working on. Like I set it into motion in October, November, and I finally filed it. So I am extremely excited about that. It is 20 pages long. So we will, I'm sure my editors are really not thrilled about that, but we'll get there when we get there. But yeah.
Okay, go to theathletic.com/game theory. That is the best way to support the show, I would imagine. Also, just a very simple way to support the show. Go to youtube.com/game theory podcast with Sam Vicini. Go subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. That's an easy way to support the show. That's free. It's great. You'll get to watch me and Mark talk about basketball. We're going to do it a lot more in the playoffs. Like,
that's right.
Do it, please. What else do I have for you guys? I have Go subscribe on Apple, Spotify, whatever podcasting platform you use. Leave ratings, reviews. Until next time, we will talk soon.